Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The boss is back, visiting his branch office in Washington. What new devilry will Netanyahu and Trump be cooking up this very evening? And USAID is down. The big Trojan horse is no more. And it's a damn good thing too, because as Elon Musk has just opined, USAID was a criminal organization. We'll be diving deep into some of the dark corners that USAID has been funding. And of course, who will make Europe great again? Mega! Well, it'll probably start in Romania. Stay tuned. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
We deceived people into believing that the Ukraine could defeat Russia, said the new Secretary of State of the United States of America. Think of the magnitude of that statement. Think of the cost of that statement. Although I see Zelensky is claiming that he never actually got anything like the amount of money that the Biden administration actually sent him. 200 billions sent by Joe Biden to Ukraine, 77 billion received by President Zelensky, or at least that is what both of them are claiming. Whether the Americans never sent the money, whether the Ukrainians never received it, will be one of many of the gigantic skeleton hunts that will undoubtedly now begin in the post-mortem on the Joe Biden administration's relationship with Zelensky. I happen to think that both of these people might be telling the truth, that Joe Biden might think he sent 200 billions, and Zelensky might be telling the truth that he only received 77 billions. The question is, therefore, where did the rest of the money go? On that we can agree with Zelensky, who's asking that very same question. If Donald Trump uses the NATO, he can destroy the Democratic Party over the subject of Ukraine. I've been saying that for 2 years now, and I wholeheartely believe that the scandal that lies beneath the Ukraine war, the bio labs, the bio war weapons, the Hunter Biden connection, the big guy, and the sons and daughters, sometimes sons and daughters being the same person, of some of the biggest grandees in the Democratic Party. I'm telling you, if you go and search for the big beasts and what they were doing over this last decade in Ukraine, you will find the mother of all scandals. And I very much hope that the Russian authorities, who will pretty soon be in charge of much of Ukraine, will cooperate as wholeheartedly as possible with the incoming American administration's investigation. But think of the magnitude of Rubio's statement. We deceived people into believing that Ukraine could defeat Russia. Think what that means for the 1 million dead Ukrainians. Think what it means for the families of the 1 million dead Ukrainians who were deceived to their deaths, who were deceived to the widowhood of their wives left behind, who were deceived to the orphaning of their children. Think what that statement means to the tens of millions of Ukrainians now living anywhere in the world that they can other than Ukraine, and who will almost certainly never go back there. So if you and your country are now neighbors of substantial numbers of Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war, say hello to them, because they aren't going back anywhere. They are yours to keep. They are yours to live with as well and as happily as you can. And some of them are very fine people, but others are not. Others will be the transmission belt, just like the Kosovans before them, for a huge spike in drug trafficking, in pornography trafficking, in people trafficking, in weapons trafficking. What the Kosovo was to the Western countries earlier in this century, Ukraine is poised to be precisely that. We deceived people, said Marco Rubio. Think what that means in relation to your own European government. If the United States deceived you, your leaders were fools. If they were not fools, but decided to fool you, then they are knaves. Some countries, unfortunate ones like ours, our leaders are both fools and knaves at one and the same time. But that's not true everywhere. You get my point. When the Americans were deceiving people into believing that Ukraine could defeat Russia, their satrap governments in Western Europe decided that they too must deceive people on behalf of the Americans. And so they did. They deceived people into believing that they must shiver through 2, nearly 3 cold and sometimes hungry winters. They deceived people into believing that they must give away tens of billions, scores of billions of euros and pounds of their public money in order for Ukraine to defeat Russia. But they were deceiving you, as the American Secretary of State has now made plain. They deceived you into believing that you must turn your back, perchance forever, on cheap and reliable Russian gas in favor of expensive and entirely unreliable and environmentally far more damaging LNG from the United States. They deceived you into believing that that was necessary. They deceived you into believing that you had to spend more, much more, on weapons of war and preparedness for war, because they deceived you into believing that Russia was an aggressive and belligerent power whose leader woke up one day with a bad feeling towards his neighbor and, unprovoked, launched a massive invasion of that neighbor, and might keep on going until he had overrun you. These were all deceptions. They deceived you into thinking that your sanctions on Russia were destroying the Russian economy, when in fact the Russian economy was doing very well, thank you very much. The economy that was being destroyed was yours. More fool you for being so deceived. After all, it was not for the want of trying. I told you until I was hoarse, here on this show and on many other platforms. I warned you they were lying, and now the United States government has admitted it. We deceived people, said the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So if you've got a government of liars and deceivers, if your government works for the biggest liar and deceiver in Washington, Joseph Biden, then question is, what are you going to do about it? Well, the good news is, the signs are that people are ready to wreak a terrible revenge on the centrist political class in Europe and hopefully in turn elsewhere in the world, in places like Japan, in places like Australia, in places like Canada, about which more in a minute. But in Europe, there is definitely something afoot. As you know, I spent the last few days in Romania and then in Italy. And I can tell you that there are movements in both those countries that turn their back entirely on the pre-existing centrist political class and are looking for something new. What they find, what they choose, might very well not be to your liking or mine. What they choose, what they find, may very well offend your liberal social democratic sensibilities. But blame the centrists and the social democrats for that. For it is their bankruptcy, their willingness to be deceived, their willingness to deceive you and everybody else that has left the ruling elites bankrupt. Let's start with Romania. You know, it's always been true that democracy, human rights, the paraphernalia of the liberal and social democratic state was just lipstick on a pig. You've heard me say it 1,000 times before. They liked it. They thought it made them look good. They thought that it made them look good in relation to others who had no lipstick, but it was always just lipstick that would be wiped away whenever it was not necessary. It used to be the case that they could fool you, trick you into doing their bidding. But if it comes to pass that you will no longer be fooled, no longer be tricked into doing their bidding, they will play their last card, which is to do and be the very opposite of that which they always claimed to do and be. Romania is just the first, but certainly the biggest example. As you're about to hear from one of that country's top investigative journalists, because the wrong guy was poised to win a landslide election for president of Romania, they merely cancelled the election. They didn't even try very hard to fool you about the purpose. They claimed, a group of judges claimed, who it turns out are not even judges for the most part, a group of the political elite assembled under the title Constitutional Court, though it was not a court, decided that Georgescu, the front runner, the man who was ready by a landslide to be elected president of Romania, they simply called off the election. They said because it had been influenced by the Russians. Now, this guy Georgescu, I've never met him. I don't know anything about him beyond what you already know or can easily find out. I only know two things of real significance to me about him. First of all, he wanted to end the deception over Ukraine. He wanted to stop deceiving people over Ukraine. He doesn't want to be an enemy of Russia just across the Black Sea. He does not want World War III, thinks we should stop going farther and farther down the road towards World War III. Well, I don't care if you call him right, far right, or whether you call him Jumping Jack Flash. I don't care what you call him. If he wants to stop World War III, I hope he wins the presidency of Romania. Whether you like his views on the pre-war history of Romania, whether you agree with him that all this wokery and quackery and greenery has all gone far enough, whether you agree with that or not, is of no moment by comparison with his unwillingness to allow Romania to be turned into a NATO base camp for never-ending, further, and potentially catastrophic confrontation with Russia. So he's all right, so far as I'm concerned. And guess what? The same is true in Germany. You can call this AfD anything that you like. I actually don't care what you call them, and they don't care what I call them. The only thing that is significant in the German election are the parties of the left and right, Sarah Wagenknecht and the AfD, both of whom say enough of this war with Russia. Bring it to an end right now. End the sanctions which are destroying the German economy. So, all these other matters, I shouldn't need to labor this point, will be moot if the world goes up in nuclear smoke. It won't matter what your personal pronouns are or your position on Palestine is. It won't matter a damn, because there will be no world and no humanity to live upon it. Which brings me to the last issue that I have time to address. Netanyahu is nothing if not frank. Before boarding the aircraft that has flown him to Washington, flying over jurisdictions, by the way, that are legally obliged to have brought his plane down and arrested him, but that didn't happen. He said, President Trump and I are going to reorder the Middle East in a way that will benefit everybody. Big ambition. He intends to persuade Trump of the wisdom of doing his bidding. And so far, so good. Trump isn't really America first, you know. He's Israel first, you know. And whatever it is that Netanyahu has fiendishly devised for these talks over the next couple of days, be sure that they're not going to benefit everybody. They're not going to benefit the 350 million souls from the Atlantic to the Gulf who live in the Arab world. They're definitely not going to benefit the millions of Palestinians ablaze this evening in the occupied West Bank of the River Jordan. The massacres and mass mutilation going on in the West Bank right now has one purpose only. Its purpose is to try to put the skids under the Palestinian refugees living there in illegally occupied territory and cascade them towards Jordan. Just as the genocide in Gaza had no other purpose than to ethnically extirpate from the land the millions of Palestinians living there. Trump has been blunt. Egypt will have to take them. Jordan will have to take them. And when both said no, he was even more blunt. They will. They will, he said. We do a lot for them. They'll do it for us. The answer to that question will determine whether the entire Middle East will go up in flames. Because any attempt to drive the millions of Palestinians in the West Bank into Jordan will not just require a pogrom of unimaginable scale in the West Bank, it will bring crashing down the puny and diminutive pygmy Hashemite dynasty in Jordan. And it will set the East Bank of the River Jordan even more ablaze than the West Bank. And ditto, any attempt to force the popinjay, puppet president of Egypt will not just collapse al-Sisi's regime, it will create a revolutionary situation in Egypt that will set the world ablaze. So be careful what you wish for, Mr. President. I know that you know that Netanyahu does not have your best interests at heart. Netanyahu has greater Israel's interests at heart, and those interests are not the same as yours, let alone the same as the rest of ours. Well, coming up, have I got a treat for you. It's a history lesson in a very short order on exactly what's happening in Romania. Stay tuned. A big thanks to the people who support me on the Patreon page. I really have come to depend on the income from that. It costs £1 a week, not even the price of a cup of coffee in an insalubrious cafe. If you think you could stretch to that, please support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, the MOATS team have added a tiered system on my Patreon page where you can become an official MOATS graduate. How about that? I speak as someone who graduated from nowhere, from the factory floor in Michelin. But you can become a MOATS graduate and legend. You can give a regular donation to support the show and my work. You can now upgrade from a mere Patreon to a MOATS graduate at £10 a month as opposed to £5 a month, I think it is. And you can receive official MOATS legend status for £20.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Have you been tariffed, by the way? Are you Canadian? 25% tariffs on Canada and on Mexico, 10% tariffs on China, and I'm pretty sure that the Danish pastry tariff is coming up rapidly just behind. Let us know if you have any tariff stories. What the American people are going to feel about the increased prices that they're now going to have to pay for Danish pastries or for tacos and anything else they buy from Canada. Is there anything to buy from Canada? Who would? I wouldn't. Has China replaced the US as technology superpower? Answer yes or no. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you are watching on the YouTube stream, please share with all of your friends and contacts. Make sure that you have subscribed to the channel and give a big thumbs up to the show. If you want to call the show and have your say, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Let me run that past you again. It's +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And The worldwide number is 00442039662625. Iosefina Pascal is not just an independent, investigative Romanian journalist. She's the best in all of those categories. Very nice of you to come on the show, Iosefina. I tried to, because a lot of our audience, unlike me, who wrote a book about Romania 35 years ago, many of our audience will not know much about Romania. They won't know, for example, how big the country is, how strategically important the country is, how close it is to the war going on there now, and they definitely won't know why it matters to them who wins the presidency in the upcoming elections. Please help me to educate our worldwide audience at the Global University of the Airwaves. Iosefina, welcome. Tell people how bogus was the pretext of abolishing, scrapping the last attempt to elect a president in your country?
First of all, Mr. Galloway, I'm deeply honored to be on your show, and I'm really grateful on behalf of all the Romanians and all of the journalists in Romania who should pay more attention to what's happening right now, for the interest you've taken in the situation in Romania, not only now, but like you said, even 35 years ago. That was a turning point for Romania's future. And everyone, I was not born at the time, everyone hoped it would be for the better. And in large, it has been for the better. But unfortunately, nowadays, we think that democracy is being shut down in Romania bit by bit. And probably everything started with the pandemic and culminated, like you said, with the overturning of the elections. Romania has the biggest border ever with Ukraine. That is a very important point to make. Romania was amongst the first countries, and actually Romanians were the first people at the borders who welcomed the Ukrainian refugees, who housed them even free of charge, because the Romanian government never actually paid for the expenses. The funds that were allegedly going to be used for the Ukrainian refugees have miraculously disappeared, just like it's been happening with the USAID from the United States of America and various other situations. So that's an issue as well. Romania has opened its Constanța port for the transit of the Ukrainian grains. Romania has opened its markets for Ukrainian products. Romania has been fully supportive of the Ukrainian humanitarian cause. But the situation right now is that people are worried, some of them justifiably so, that Romania might get involved in a clash of sorts, a military clash. Some people have spoken, especially on an international level, about the largest NATO military base being built or actually extended in Mihail Kogălnicianu, which could be a reason as to why they don't want a nationalist, a sovereign candidate like Călin Georgescu to assume office, the presidential office. It's a bit more complicated than that. I don't see just the military aspect of it, but I see the economical one, pertaining to our natural resources and the way we use and exploit these resources, or should do, in our own interest. And Brussels has huge interests in when it comes to countries' natural resources, especially with the new economic changes that they're preparing, which will essentially try to unify all of the European capital markets, which essentially means 2 or even 3 speed types of European Union, where some markets more in the developed countries will benefit off of the resources from the less developed countries, almost free of charge if you want. There are multiple reasons as to why the establishment, both in Romania and abroad, wouldn't want a president like Călin Georgescu. But the people do, and they've shown that in the first round of the presidential elections, even in the second round of the presidential elections, because as you know, the elections were stopped during the voting. Romanians from abroad were actually voting, and most of the votes actually went to Călin Georgescu. 70% of the votes from abroad in the second round were for Călin Georgescu. During this time, the Constitutional Court of Romania interfered brutally, overturning their own decision to validate the first presidential round's election results and canceling the ongoing election process in the second round. This has been unprecedented. We've had pretty strong, dangerous situations before in the past, where millions of votes were overturned on a public referendum when we were trying to get rid, legally speaking, of former President Băsescu, but nothing to this scale. This is unprecedented, especially because now we have legal experts from the Venice Commission, which have stated they didn't see any proof, there wasn't any right to a fair trial. The candidate, Călin Georgescu, couldn't actually defend himself, and there is absolutely no way that this decision can be, attacked in a court of justice. So it's mandatory to be followed, implemented, and there is no way to overturn it, at least not on a procedural manner that we know of. The only way that could be changed is that if the same constitutional court would come back to that decision and decide, like it has in the past, to overturn its own decision basically for a second time. And given the public support that we've seen in the past months, it's already been almost 2 months since the canceling of the Romanian elections, things might change. Today, for example, we had a strong signal from the country's current prime minister, the leftist socialist Marcel Ciolacu. He actually admitted publicly that there was no evidence to overturn the election and that candidates shouldn't be banned from participating in the elections without any solid evidence. This is absolutely insane, given the fact that the same guy actually was applauding and supporting the decision to overturn the election results. And people need to know that this guy, Marcel Ciolacu, our prime minister, who is a huge fan of Keir Starmer, by the way, I think that's an important point to make. He actually took pictures with him during his presidential campaign. This guy didn't make the second round of the elections. He was really badly sanctioned by the people through their vote. So people are rightfully suspecting that both our illegitimately sitting president Klaus Iohannis and the prime minister and other leaders of the ruling parties are colluding in order to stop Călin Georgescu from becoming president, although I don't see that happening. It's really impossible to achieve that in a
I saw the latest opinion poll. The latest opinion poll puts Georgescu so far ahead. I mean, I think he was on 47%, and his nearest challenger was on 10%. So the tidal wave of Georgescu's support is quite likely, in my view, to prevail. Unless they want to end up like old Ceausescu on the balcony of the Central Committee building of the PCR, and instead of Iliescu numai, it will be one of them or all of them numai. Let's, if you like, widen this, Iosefina. The dichotomy here, as I said earlier, is not about left or right. It's about one side wants globalism, wants us to be ruled by globalized economic forces and the institutions of that globalization, the WEF, NATO, the European Union. They want them to make the key decisions about our lives and our countries. And the other polarity is this. Those however inchoate of form, insist on the national sovereignty of their own country, insist on the independence of their own country, might well come to difficult conclusions, even conclusions that the West can live with, but insists on making those themselves. Now, this dichotomy is present in every country, and it's definitely present in yours. But in yours, the national sovereignty candidate, Georgescu, would appear to be on the brink of the biggest victory. Can the globalists, can the NATO and the EU, can they live with that? Or might they try to stop Georgescu in some extraordinary way?
They've tried to. This was the first attempt. And actually, this attempt not only shocked Romania's democracy to the core, and helped many people to wake up to what is happening in Romania and how authoritarian this current government can be, and the political establishment. And not only that, because we also had the intelligence agencies involved in helping overturn the election results, because they were the ones that provided the alleged Russia collusion information. So people woke up to this new paradigm in Romania. Some of them acknowledged this from, like I said, back in the pandemic. Some of them acknowledged it with the unilateral narrative promoted by the government on only supporting Ukraine at all costs, even at the cost of losing our defensive missile system, the Patriot that we donated to Ukraine, at all costs, like I said. But the people themselves have realized that we can. Even if we look at other examples, Viktor Orban is perceived as a patriot in his country. He has an approval rate that is huge among his peers, and he's been in power for, I think, decades. I'm not sure, I don't want to be wrong, but he's been in power for decades. Romania has, well, historical debates, let's call them that, with Hungary, but people in Romania long for a leader like that has proven to others in the EU that you can be a sovereign leader and follow your country's own interests without leaving the EU, without leaving NATO. Because the main point that they're trying to attack Georgescu with is that he is threatening to leave NATO and the EU, which is not true. He simply said we need to negotiate on our own terms, which is perfectly normal, especially because Romania has such an important geostrategical position and geopolitical influence, or could have, with the right diplomats, with the right politicians, and the right decisions at the right negotiating table. We're not at the negotiating table. Someone said if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and that's perfectly true. There are decisions being made in Romania's name by other leaders, including Viktor Orban, which may not actually be in our interest, simply because he is present at the negotiations table and we are not. Will the EU and NATO stop or continue interfering in the elections? I don't think they can, besides the fact that the Prime Minister admitted today that there was no proof whatsoever to cancel the elections and to block Călin Georgescu's candidacy. He also kind of nuanced his discourse. Suddenly, all of the globalists are talking about how climate change is not really good, how the globalists are not really that good. So they're nuancing their discourse, which means they realize that this wave of change cannot be stopped. Obviously, the people are not dumb. They're not naive. They're not going to believe this sudden change of heart from the establishment. They're not going to vote the carbon copies. They're going to vote for Călin Georgescu, the original independent candidate, because that's important. People need to understand that in Romania for the past 10 years, we've had a president that has been dividing the country on political bias. So essentially, it didn't matter who you voted for in the parliamentary elections. Iohannis would just name whoever he wanted as prime minister. He would directly interfere unconstitutionally in the political affairs of the parties and wouldn't respect essentially the will of the people. So Romanians need a president that can unite and that can be perceived and is actually independent of this political, like you said, bias of the left, right, and obviously opposes globalism. I know I've been to the Make Europe Great Again conferences in Brussels last week, and I can tell you for sure that all of the European conservatives, whatever you want to call them, anti-globalists, all of them are worried about the scenario that was implemented in Romania. This sounds like a recipe. I said that first in Romania, in the day, in the moment they actually took the decision, this horrible decision to cancel our elections. This is a precedent that's going to be exported into other EU countries. And lo and behold, some of them are actually trying that with either criminal cases against conservative candidates, against Giorgia Meloni, against Poland's Law and Justice Party members, against other sovereign and nationalist parties in Poland, against Alice Weidel of the AfD in Germany, the attempt to ban a whole party, a party that has been legally founded and legally, activated in German politics for so long. They're trying to ban not only free speech, but also the candidates themselves. So slowly, people started waking up worldwide that this is a scenario that is doable in other countries, especially where the interests are very high. And Romania has always been of high interest, like I said, because of its position on the map, put simply, because of its natural resources, and because of its historical background, because we need to go back 35 years ago or even further than that. Romania has been a guarantee for peace, historically speaking, and has had good relations with China even. The Chinese people, although they are, well, from some points of view, especially from a conservative point of view, controversial partners, economically speaking, they're light years ahead of Western democracies, which should be worrying to us and should push us towards, advancement, but it's not. We're here busy with gender politics, with forced migration, with climate change, and so on. So Romania could be a factor of stability, of peace, of negotiations. It had that capacity in the past. It's not something I'm saying out of a patriotic, exaggerated, or exacerbated feeling. It is the truth. With the right people, Romania can help achieve not essentially world peace, but peace, especially in a very tumultuous European Union.
Iosefina Pascal, independent, investigative Romanian journalist. Thank you for your time and eloquence, and give my regards to your dear mama, please. Has China replaced the US as technology superpower? Yes or no? I've got to tell you, this is the most one-sided poll in history. Its value is only in the number of votes that come in, virtually 20,000 so far. Has China replaced the US as technology superpower? Next week, do bears defecate in the woods? Is the Pope a Catholic? Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls up to the hour. Stay tuned.
All the activists that have been making noise about what Israel is doing, the genocide. And so, it takes a world to make this happen, but thank God Trump is leading the pack. But my question to you is, can we celebrate? It seems like it's too soon to celebrate because we don't know, what's really going to happen. I just don't trust those Israelis. They say one thing and do another. Look what they're doing in Lebanon. So What is your level of optimism for this latest attempt at a ceasefire? And that's my main question. So I'll let you answer
well,
that.
At least 75%, Wendy, and cautious celebration. A non-alcoholic glass of champagne, perhaps. Actually, I recommend that in general, especially date champagne. Has anyone out there tasted date champagne made entirely from dates? And of course, non-alcoholic. It is superb. If I could get my hands on one of those this evening, which I definitely can't, I would be having a glass of that and quietly, cautiously celebrating. But you are absolutely right to say, God bless Jeffrey Sachs and all the other speakers and activists who have striven might and main in all weathers, in all countries, in all parts of the world to help bring about the atmosphere that has prevailed and has forced the American presidency to be changed, and for the American presidential policy towards the war to be changed. I'm in no doubt about this, why I mentioned them first. Trump is the reason there is a ceasefire. He is the reason. If Harris had won, there would have been no ceasefire. That's quite an achievement, you know, before you've even got your feet in the presidential slippers.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I see a leaked Home Office report says that watching Michael Portillo's Great British Railway journeys may be a sign of far-right proclivity. My God, this is getting worrying. It's one of my favorite TV programs. Let's go to Florida, where Raz is on the line about Trump. Go ahead, Raz. Raz, you there? Let me give you the numbers again, by the way. I should have done that. It is toll-free in the US and Canada, +1-844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number, 0044 203 966 2625. Dennis is on the line in New York on Gaza and Ukraine. Go ahead, Dennis.
Hi, George. Nice to talk to you again. Thank you again for all the good work you do. The last time we spoke,
Welcome, sir.
I expressed my concern about Donald Trump's achievements, and, you know, God bless the Palestinians, and God bless Donald Trump for his efforts and his ability and his success in achieving the ceasefire. My concern is that there are some ulterior motives here. I expressed my view that Trump is a hopeless, helpless American exceptionalist, to which you responded, that may be true, but he's a better alternative than Harris and Biden. I agree with that. But I have done a little more checking now. I found an interview that Jared Kushner had at Harvard University back in February or March of 2024, where he advocated expelling all the Palestinians from Gaza and expressed his view that the real estate, the beachfront real estate in Gaza is of great value. So I've been looking into the Ukraine with BlackRock and the deal they made with Zelensky to rebuild the Ukraine after the war. And Jared Kushner's investment vehicle, Affinity Partners, which is funded by the Saudis and the UAE and the Qataris. And an investment that Jared Kushner recently made in an Israeli company called Phoenix Capital that is a major funder and insurance company for settlements in the Golan and in the West Bank. They own shopping malls and funding settlements and that. So there's something nefarious going on here.
Yeah, but
and I think we need to look
this is
at where
a false dichotomy. I think it's a false dichotomy, Dennis. I don't disagree with you at all about the fetid and nefarious schemes in the minds of people like Jared Kushner. My problem with your kind of approach is, first of all, it treats the wish as the parent of the reality, which it isn't. A wish is just a wish until someone can make it a reality, and for someone to make a reality, you glibly talk there about the clearance of Gaza and the West Bank. But that requires millions of Palestinians to agree to be cleared. And I'm here to tell you that they will not do so, and that they will fight with their teeth, if necessary, any attempt to clear them. So it's not enough for Jared Kushner to want to develop the beachfront properties in Gaza. That would require the mass surrender, mass suicide, or mass clearance of the people who are sitting on that seaside right now. And therefore, I always make this point, I'm trying to put it not unkindly, it becomes a council of despair, you see. It becomes an imbuing our enemies with some kind of superpower state of mind and being. But they're not superpowers. Israel has been trying to destroy the Palestinian people in Gaza for a very, very long time, and they have never achieved it. And they tried harder this time than they have ever tried before. But they never achieved it. And moreover, have paid an economic and political cost in the world higher than the cost that they have ever paid. So, of course, I'm with you in believing that if these people could do all kinds of devilish things, of course they would do them. My problem is that if you go through life supposing that whatever they want to do, they will be able to do, then you're helping them rather than opposing them. And that's a dangerous thing to do. Moreover, the world has changed. Russia and China are on the stage. Iran is on the stage. Israel and America cannot do what they want to do. I mean, Trump's opening gambits on the Ukraine, for example, have been laughed at in Moscow. It is a laughable idea what Trump is proposing as his opening gambit in negotiations with Russia over Ukraine. The Russians are ending the Ukraine war by themselves, by concrete reality, by fait accompli. That's exactly what's happening now. And if Trump doesn't hurry up and come forward with sensible negotiating positions, there won't be any Ukraine left at all. Now, a massive thanks to this week's biggest donors. Now that we can donate directly through our own website, it has transformed the financial landscape. And in particular, I would like to thank Noor-al-Din Asif, King's Counsel, KC, in Canada, for his extraordinary generosity. And my dear sir, I do indeed make dua for your late father. He was extremely generous, but others were very generous too. Elvind Osnis, Stephen Leach, Pamela Chapman, Bruce Lanhove, Monica Tratnik, and many, many more. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because without your financial support, we don't have a show. I don't know quite how more pointedly I can put that. Nobody else is going to keep this show going. Only you and the earnings that we have from social media platforms that could stop them at any moment. We need you. So you can donate via our new MOATS.tv website, and you should watch the show on there also, live. You can see all the clips from my interviews, my monologues in full, and our new and improved donation feature. Click on the Donate Now button anywhere on the site and donate whatever you can. One-off donations, of course, are welcome, or even better, recurring donations every week, every month, every quarter, yearly, £1, $10, €20, whatever you can give. And I know there's a cold snap on, so hurry up and put us in your will. Why don't you? Just a tiny, tiny percentage of your estate could secure this show's future long after you and indeed I am gone. Now, we're working up, and we hope to bring you soon, a special feature every week from the legend that is Erebos in New York. We haven't quite put that together yet, but it's coming, I can assure you. Here he is now on the line on the EU. Erebos, welcome.
A grand rising, greetings and salutations. Blessings to Mr. Galloway, his family, the fantastic MOATS staff, the wonderful Gayatri, and everyone, and him, the MOATS TV, the MOATS.tv, or is it MOATSTV.com, whatever it is.
Yeah, MOATS.tv, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. I am heartened to know this is something I actually attempted to communicate with you about like 2-3 years ago, because I saw what YouTube was doing to other presenters and people with opinions that went against the orthodoxy. They were charging them, basically ripping them off worse than the mafia. At least the mafia used to charge 10%. These people want 20, 30, 40%, and then kicking you off the airwaves or bringing down your videos. So it is fantastic. Everyone in the world within the sound of my voice and yours should definitely support MOATS TV. Miss Iosefina there, Iosefina, is a most impressive addition to MOATS. She is excellent. I was highly impressed with that young lady. Before I launch into my fusillade about the EU, there's a request here on Twitter by someone with the handle Songs and Rifles of the Resistance, and they made this request very quickly. If you should call the show tonight, give a shout out to Jerry. It made me smile. An Irishman in Japan who misses his home in ways that no words could ever adequately convey. Listening to the town I love so well, now with tears in my eyes, reminds me of home but breaks my heart. So I hope that made Songs and Rifles of the Resistance, gave them a little cheer.
Very beautifully done, yes, well done.
As far as the EU goes, because, you know, as Morpheus told Neo in my favorite film of all time, The Matrix, time is always against us. The EU is a dictatorship, right? Those are unelected bureaucrats. You know, I hear it almost every day. You know, these are people, you know, they are self-elected. Most of them are creations from Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, eat them bugs, you know, eat the bugs, Galloway. You know, these people are creations. They came out of a political factory, right? You shake them out of a box, and then you put them together like a Lego set and release them upon the world. And these are the people that are ruining Europe. They're ruining the United Kingdom, unelected bureaucrats. And you have to use their currency. You have to follow their social policies. You have to follow their economic policies. And once your economic policies are dictated to by bureaucrats like this, you don't have a country. What you have is a state with a flag and some signed documents saying that you're independent. They're a little better than the rest of us that were in the global majority, us in the Caribbean and in Africa and in Latin America and so forth. You know, you wave a flag and you celebrate Independence Day, but you can't make legal decisions. You can't make international economic decisions. Why is it Jamaica can't trade with Cuba? And it's right there. Right? Why is it when Cuba needs help or we need help, we can't get it? Because they're still throwing themselves before the crown. You know, so it's unfortunate, but as long as people are part of EU and part of NATO, they're not going to get out of it. You know, and then the people said no, and they have to stand up and break that relationship and put themselves first, put their sovereignty first. No one that's part of the EU is sovereign. That's those two things. That's a moronic.
Well, that's a fact. And actually, you got me thinking, Erebos, as you always do. As you know, I was an underground operative of the African National Congress during apartheid, in apartheid South Africa. And as such, in the course of which, I frequently visited what were called Bantustans. They were nominally, ridiculous as it now sounds, independent countries. Bophuthatswana, for example, we were told was an independent country, had its own government, its own flag, its own parliament building. But every fool knew that Bophuthatswana was a puppet, pop-up. What's the word of the Russian villages, the made-up villages, the Potemkin villages of that age were these Bantustans. Well, actually, these European unions, particularly the smaller ones and the mid-level ones, you know, the barking chihuahuas and so on in Latvia and places like that, who are increasingly, by the way, providing the cadre that runs the EU. Imagine, they've got the population of a mid-sized city somewhere, and yet they are supposedly a sovereign country and moreover running the European Union. These Bantustans have no future. But the mid-level countries, important countries like Romania, with a decent-sized population, with a huge landmass, and with a strategic place on the map in the world, with lots of resources that other people want and need, these are the countries that have to put their foot down and say, we are a sovereign people. We are ready to cooperate with others, but only where it is in the interests of our own people. That's what's beginning to happen. First in Romania, and I hope more and more across the European continent. Erebos in New York, as always, a big thanks to you. Now, on the podcast front, we're in the top 20 in Singapore, New Zealand, and Thailand. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can listen to the weekly podcast via the moats.tv website. Look, I need to take a quick break, but coming up is Professor Seyed Marandi, the chair of the American Studies at the University of Tehran, and one of the most important guests we ever have on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, everybody has their highlight of the week. Let me have yours, by the way, in writing. But mine was undoubtedly the abject humiliation of Piers Morgan by Tucker Carlson in their double-header in the Saudi desert. When I first saw it advertised, I thought this is going to be a mutual backslapping, back-scratching festival in which two former Rupert Murdoch employees will agree on everything and politely agree to disagree on that which they feel they now must disagree on. But the journey of Tucker Carlson is a quite remarkable one. The political, philosophical journey of Tucker Carlson on his way to becoming, and it's not a coincidence, the world's most important broadcaster, the top broadcaster in the entire world. That journey has left him, or rather left Piers Morgan, trailing in the dust. Because, well, you see, Piers hasn't made any journey at all, except in the direction of perdition and extinction. Professor Seyed Marandi has regularly humiliated Piers Morgan. I don't know if he'll ever be allowed back on. I doubt if I will. But one of the things Professor Marandi and I have in common is that whenever we get the chance, we give him a good hiding. Professor Marandi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The most significant thing that happened this week in your region, it seemed to me, was the governments of Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and others flat-out refusal of President Trump's plan to use Egypt and Jordan as a dumping ground for millions of Palestinians. I was quite surprised by the strength of their rejection of Trump's plan. It doesn't seem to have impressed Trump much. What do you think's really going on?
I think Trump probably underestimates how much the world has changed and how much weaker the United States and its allies are today than they were 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I think the defeat of the Israeli regime, both in Gaza as well as in Lebanon, this contributes to the reactions that we're seeing from these governments. We saw the Israeli regime humiliated in Gaza with the release of the female prisoners, the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers who were well taken care of. And we saw the hundreds of thousands of Gazans moving to the north courageously. And we also saw in Lebanon how people power and supporters of the resistance went unarmed to the south and expelled the Israeli regime from most of the areas that it occupied. We saw women in Lebanon standing up to tanks and others standing up to soldiers who were literally shooting at them or groups of people. So under these circumstances, it's increasingly difficult for any regime to abide by the demands of the United States, because they would be undermined by their own people. I think that General Sisi knows that he cannot survive if he agrees to Trump's demands, especially since the people of Gaza and Lebanon so effectively resisted extermination and expulsion. And the same is true with Jordan, the same is true with Saudi Arabia and the process of normalization. Of course, we'll have to see what happens in the days and weeks ahead, but I do think that these are signs of a changing region and a changing world.
Yes, it looks that way to me. Now, I wanted to ask you about, because I know you know a lot about Russia as well as about Iran, though responsible for decisions in neither country, what the importance of the visit to Moscow by the Iranian president and the signing of the new strategic partnership between Iran and Russia. How far does that go?
Well, actually, I am in Moscow today, and we have been discussing that among ourselves, and colleagues have been talking about the importance of this agreement between the two countries. I think it's very clear that the relationship between Iran and Russia has evolved steadily ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And especially over the past 3 years, the relationship has grown dramatically. And this agreement reflects that growth. It is a very important agreement, especially with regards to economic cooperation, military cooperation. But I think the foundation is the economic relationship that will bloom. It will effectively make the two countries much more powerful. We will have the development of a north-south corridor that will link Russia to the Persian Gulf and will enable it to trade with Africa, the Indian subcontinent, East Asia and Southeast Asia without needing the canal or using the Mediterranean. It will be much swifter, much less expensive. The Suez Canal will no longer be a source of threat, nor will Turkey be a source of threat, and it will be much less expensive for them to do trade. That is one aspect to it. Another is energy cooperation. Russia has the world's largest gas reserves, and Iran has the second largest gas reserve. So you can imagine how important it will be, their cooperation. And now Iran is going to be a hub for Russian gas. The same is true with Russian wheat and grains, as well as potentially oil in future. So there is a lot the two countries can do together. And the Americans, ironically, have been the catalyst to this blooming relationship. By sanctioning both countries, the two countries have been working together and developing projects that were sadly neglected for decades. And that, I think, is going to change for good, and it will be permanent.
Well, I didn't know you were in Moscow, and so I wish you every success there. I wanted to take you back, though, to your own region to deal with an issue that perplexes me, and that is the role of Azerbaijan and the role of its president, Aliyev, who seems to play both ends against the middle quite successfully. He seems to be so close to Israel that effectively they are, and can be at least, a cat's paw for Israel's objectives in the region. It shares some of the same enemies as Israel, and yet it's a part of the Islamic world. It is a Turkic country, has close relations with Erdogan. How is it possible to maintain this balancing act, and how significant is it? as a potential danger to Iran?
Aliyev and Erdogan have been two people who really have done a great deal of damage to the Palestinian cause and to the resistance in Gaza, as well as the resistance in Lebanon, in that the two have been helping the Israeli regime by selling inexpensive oil, cheap oil, to Netanyahu during these 15 to 16 months of genocide. And despite repeated calls from Iran and many others and their own people to end this this trade and to stop fueling the Holocaust in Gaza, they refused. And Aliyev is supposedly a Shia Muslim, and Erdogan is supposedly a Sunni Muslim, and it shows that betraying the Palestinian cause has nothing to do with sect or religion, just as we've seen so many Jews over the past 15, 16 months stand up against the Israeli regime. And of course, one recent event was when Max Blumenthal humiliated the U.S. Secretary of State. I think the threat really is directed towards Aliyev himself. His own people are very upset about his behavior and his dependence on the Israeli regime. And I think history will remember what he did during these 15, 16 months, and history will remember what Mr. Erdogan did as well. Not only did Mr. Erdogan, of course, help the Israeli regime through providing it with fuel, but of course he also supported ISIS and Al-Qaeda in destroying Syria.
Well, that's my final subject that I wanted to segue onto, so you've done it for me. Syria has a new president. It's funny, when Bashar al-Assad used to win landslide majorities, he was called, a fake president. His election results were ridiculed. Now Syria's got a new president without any election at all. How do you think it's all going there now?
Well, it's going very similar to the sanctions. The same crowd that was saying that Syria should be sanctioned and that the sanctions are directed at the Syrian president, or the fake Syrian president, Assad, as they would call him. The same people are now saying that these sanctions are devastating Syrians. And this, I think, exposes their hypocrisy. The very fact that they've been supporting the devastation of Syria for all these years, and now they've suddenly changed their tune, I think is revealing. And it's very sad to see that someone like tulsigabbard would go and say all the things that we've been saying for the past 13 years, and these people have been closing their eyes and they've refused to listen to the fact. And someone like tulsigabbard has to say the truth, but these people who've been supporting regime change, and many of them pretend to be supporters of Palestine, these same people are unwilling to admit what tulsigabbard stated openly in her Senate confirmation hearing. I think that is something that they should be ashamed about, and that they this should never be forgotten.
I must say I was mightily impressed by her dignity under fire. I feel that we're looking at the United States' first woman president when we look at the hopefully soon to be confirmed intelligence chief in the United States. She refused to budge an inch from her previous positions and made the point that Al-Qaeda is now running Syria.
Yes, and she also made reference to the very famous email that you have been speaking about repeatedly, and I have been speaking about repeatedly, and our friends have been saying repeatedly. She said this in front of a national, Jake Sullivan, on February the 12th, 2012, said that in Syria, Al-Qaeda is on our side. This, of course, is thanks to WikiLeaks, and thanks to the head of WikiLeaks, who spent years in jail because of the fact that he exposed these crimes. And of course, Julian Assange is forgotten by many, but he has played a huge role in exposing these crimes. But it is extraordinary that the same people that carried out 9/11, according to what we've been told, the same people that carried out the 7/7 bombings, according to what we've been told, and the Manchester Arena attack, the same people a decade later, a decade after 9/11, became allies of the United States in Libya and in Syria. And again, those people who've been supporting this regime change operation for 13 years, I don't know how they can look at their opposition to the Israeli regime over the past 15 months and at the same time support a dirty war in Syria that was led by the United States, the #1 backer of the Israeli regime.
Absolutely. So Professor Seyed Marandi, Chair of American Studies, but currently in Moscow. Wrap up well, sir. It's cold out there at this time of the year. Thanks for joining us. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri's social media roundup. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
One of the most prescient things I've ever said on here, and some ridiculed it at the time when I made the point that the idea that if an intermediate nuclear war broke out on the European mainland between Russia and the NATO European powers, that the United States would definitely not sacrifice itself in order to defend Britain or any other part of Europe. When I said that on here at the time, people talked about Article 5, Article 6, all the protocols of NATO and all the rest. The United States is currently threatening war against other members of NATO. Never mind be prepared to have all of its great cities incinerated in an intercontinental ballistic nuclear war, rather than see, I don't know, Poland overrun or Britain snuffed out. Let's go to one of the countries that is actually being threatened by the United States right at this minute. It's Amy in Canada. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, hi, George. Thank you for taking my call, and hi to the team. Yes, I'm in Canada.
Ahead, good man.
Yeah, I'm in Canada, and I think this story is so ridiculous, and I'm so upset. I think we are all upset at that situation because Justin Trudeau, and his team, they have no leadership whatsoever. I don't understand how come Canada has 3/4 of his trade with United States, okay? And it's like putting all your eggs in the same basket. They didn't even think that it won't stay like this forever. I mean, you have to diversify, and you have to improve your technology and your services and your products in order to be more competitive. But Canada government and leadership is so weak and so, I don't know, incompetent, that they didn't even think about the future, and now we are in this situation. And the worst thing is that us Canadian people are going to pay the price, because Trudeau said, okay, now you have to promote Canadian products, you have to buy Canadian. I'm okay with that. But Canada is so expensive. Sometimes foreign products are cheaper than Canadian products, and we want to buy Canadian, but we also have to think about our bottom line, because everything is through the roof. The rent, cars, everything is expensive. And Trudeau, he has to talk to business people, because the inflation is all made up. Since COVID, the prices are through the roof. We don't even know why everything is expensive. You want to buy your banana, sometimes $10. I'm not kidding. $10 for like 5 bananas. So, I mean, I'm so upset. I'm so mad. And now what is the solution? We were all thinking that Trump was kidding with making Canada the 51st state. But actually, it's very serious. And this whole tariff situation is to make us want to be in the U.S., because prices are going to be so high that the price to pay will be to become U.S. citizens or U.S. 51st state. But we will lose our social health insurance. We will lose so many things. Canada is suffering, but the leadership, they were cozy, they were living the life while everything was unfolding before their eyes, and now they're panicking, asking us to buy Canadian products. They have to find the solution. If they're listening to me, I know they watch your show. So I am mad as hell, because they didn't do anything to prevent that situation, and now we have to pay the price. Trudeau is gone. Trudeau is going to go. But the one who's going to replace him, he has to fix that problem. We don't want to be part of the U.S., and we don't want to pay the price. So this is what I wanted to say. I'm so mad. I'm sorry for my language.
Well, you said it so brilliantly. I'm sorry you're coming to an end. You said it so cogently, and you explained the bemusement of the Canadian public that they should be turned on in this way by a fellow NATO member, next door neighbor, Big Daddy, and so on. But that's because they weren't listening to me. I told them over and over again that if you have no self-respect, why should anybody else respect you? If you act like a serf, why should the feudal lord not demand his droit de seigneur and take his toll from the serfs? That's what feudalism, after all, is all about. The Canadian state, led by Trudeau and his predecessors, have done the United States bidding at home and abroad well over half a century. In the Korean War, why did you send soldiers to the Korean War? I'll tell you why. Because you wanted to please the feudal lord. Why did Canada transform itself from a country much loved in, for example, Lebanon, where its peacekeeping role was legend, into just another ugly face of Zionism, of Netanyahu's settler state and apartheid regime? Why did Canada arrest the daughter of the head of Huawei? Why did they promote every ugly anti-China trope, even worse than in the United States. Why did Canada eulogize the fascist Nazi remnants in the Canadian Parliament itself in the name of supporting America's war against Ukraine? Look, Amy, I'm against what's happening to Canada. But Canada totally deserves it. I'm sorry. The ordinary people elected these governments that did all that, and now they're about to pay the price for having done so. Thanks for your call. Comments on YouTube. You can scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. And Ambrose Morgan has, when the world's largest economy starts a trade war with everyone, the only possible outcome is hyperinflation and the total destruction of the global financial system. And Sammy Gitt says US will ban open source DeepSeek, saying the Uyghurs are forced to build AI in concentration camps. And Paul Railton says the only reason the US was a great technological nation was that they imported genius. They can't do that now. Their own education system is pathetic. And Humongous Shift says Israel's mess long precedes Trump. Don't pin this on him. Indeed, it's true. Rob Keir says if Trump wants the US oil to be self-sufficient, oil will be $120 a barrel because oil companies in the US need that price to make a profit. One of my favorite callers. Up next, it's Donna in Panama. Go ahead, Donna.
Hello, George. I wanted to say something to you that I appreciate so much, your incredible eloquence and the fact you're so very articulate. Rarely do we even hear American-born university graduates with advanced degrees so eloquent as you are, and I my hat goes off to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So the reason I'm calling. Oh, well, you deserve it. The reason I'm calling is my dear friend and fellow activist, octogenarian, nearly non-agenarian, Jeff Blankfort, longtime Jewish leftist activist, veteran, educator, radio host, says there aren't any angels in the world anymore. Putin cozies up to Netanyahu. He makes deals with him. He could have prevented a lot of the horrors that went on in Syria. Xi Jinping in China, same thing. He also says that Assad supported the Iraq war. So, and I said to Jeff, who I would love for you to have on the program, he's a fascinating person. And I said, what can we do? He said, sadly, there's very little we can do. So I just wanted to run that by you and see what you think.
Well, we'll certainly check out whether the man you're talking about, we better hurry up. If he's almost a non-genarian, we better get him on the show soon. And of course, to a considerable extent, what you have represented as his view is correct. There are no angels, and everybody could have done more. I myself have publicly called on China from the very beginning, for example, of the Gaza catastrophe. China could have sailed a hospital ship into the bay and told Netanyahu that they were going to operate on the wounded Palestinian children who were carried up the gangplank. And if Netanyahu wanted to fire on a Chinese naval hospital ship, then so be it, and face the consequences. China could have done that. And I don't believe that Netanyahu would have fired, but it was a risk worth taking. And the day will come when China will do that kind of thing. The Chinese leadership are very cautious people. They take a very long time even to reply to emails, never mind to make important decisions that could assert themselves on the global stage. That's all true. The Russian leadership has its hands full. It's already fighting all of NATO in the Ukraine. So it's hardly realistic that Russia would have been in a position to, as it were, fight on a second front or a third front. But they have now made this arrangement with Iran that we've just been talking about, and I believe that that arrangement fundamentally changes the balance of power in the world, which is why I asked the Professor Marandi about it. There are no angels, but there are no devils in hell, because they're all here on the Western political stage, and we must struggle against them. Life is a ceaseless struggle between good and bad, between right and wrong, even within ourselves, with our conscience acting as our director, our daily communion with God. Donna, I always love to hear you, and thank you for your kind words. Mohammed is in Canada on the tariffs. It's causing a bit of a stir, I can see, in Canada. Mohammed, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway, for giving me this opportunity. One thing Canadians don't realize is the fact that I know we're going to feel the brunt of Mr. Trump's crazy ideas. Like, I'll give you for one, like, what he doesn't know, like, 90% of the oil corporations in Canada are Americans, right? And they're paying, like, way, way less compared to what the price of oil costs in the oil market. And shipping everything to Texas by train, and those train companies are Americans. He doesn't know all those stuff. What Canada should do, we should build more refineries in Canada, upgraders, to process our own oil instead of giving our stuff for free to the Americans. And
well, you should do, Mohammed, and you should always have done. Why do you allow your oil to be owned by American oil companies? Why do you allow them to do the refining themselves in their own country rather than in yours? Why do you allow the transportation to be done by U.S. train companies? This is the point I was making. If you behave like a serf, you'll be treated like a serf. Who wouldn't? If you have no respect for yourselves, why should Trump respect you? Do you see me?
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right about that. Even with your case, I've been following for quite a very long time. The reason why the Americans didn't mess with you or put you in jail, they should have put you in jail a long time ago, is because you went there and put them in their place. That's the reason why I have so much respect for you. When they were saying you're friends with Saddam, you're friends with this and that, all that kind of rubbish they were talking about, you went there and let them know who the real friends of Saddam are, like Donald Rumsfeld and all those people. It's the same thing with Canada today. They're blackmailing you, telling you can't do this, you can't do that. When the governments come up with ideas to like say, okay, let's build refineries or upgraders, you know what I mean? They will tell, oh, yeah, this will this. They're talking about Greenpeace. Greenpeace will come here, they will do this and all that garbage. Or talking about green energy. Tell you things that doesn't even make sense. It's the same thing with, I had you just now when you were talking about Huawei, like for 5G technology. Huawei was almost ready to do the stuff in Canada, improvement in Canada. Like, I see stuff about China today. China is way, way ahead of North America. Like, you see their infrastructure, you see their roads, you see all those things. The Americans are terrible people. Because they don't have the knowledge and know how to do things, they will find ways to convince you not to do the right things. So, like, I know it's going to be tough on us for a couple of years, but trust me, in the long run, it's good for us. Now that we've known that we can trust the Americans, you keep on doing business with one person. When that person decided to screw you, you're screwed for good. So it's a wake-up call to our, to our politicians.
Well, I hope that the lesson is learned, Mohammed, in Canada, and I hope it is learned in Denmark. Everything I've said about Canada, I could have said about Denmark. And despite their dog-like subservience to the American empire, Trump's about to take part of their sovereign territory without so much as a by your leave. Well, if Canada, with its leaders, deserves what Trump is now giving them, so I'm afraid does Denmark. Let me give you a poll update. 23,000 votes have been cast. Has China replaced the US as technology superpower? It is overwhelmingly yes. On Telegram, 92%. On X, 80%. On the YouTube community poll, 83%. And on the YouTube stream, 86%. So let's close that poll there and say, China, you are official. You are the technology superpower. Let's go to Greece, where Jalal wants to say something on these tariff wars. Go ahead, Jalal.
Yeah, George, hello. First of all, just want to say I think you are very respectful among all of your listeners and viewers. And I want to say I'm very happy to actually be speaking to you. About the tariff wars, I will be very quick. What I think the tariffs so far are just an act of bullying from the United States towards everybody. Well, it depends on the way that they go with. Now with Canada, they go with the tariff. With Mexico, they go with the borders. With Denmark, they go with Greenland. Every single country has a way of going of this bullying. This is exactly what I wanted to say. Thank you again for your time.
You said it very well. And if you look at the areas that we've discussed just in this show this evening, in less than 2 hours, Trump has ordered the president of Egypt and the king of Jordan to do what he tells them on the West Bank and Gaza. And they have refused. And for the reasons Marandi explained, I believe they'll continue to refuse. They have to refuse. Otherwise, they'll come crashing down. They'll end up hanging upside down by the ankles if they do not continue to refuse. Denmark, well, the French are offering to go to Greenland to defend it from their American ally, in whose service they've been ever since they folded like a chief tent in the front of Hitler's army in 1940. They've been a slave to the Americans, particularly since the late President de Gaulle. They have done everything that the Americans have asked of them, and now they are effectively threatening to go to war with the United States by going to the defense of Denmark and Greenland. I've got to warn the Greenlanders. They're not that great fighters. You're Johnny Frenchman. I mean, think of a Beaugest type fort with the French Foreign Legion firing blanks. Don't count on them, is what I'm saying. We counted on them in the summer of 1940, and look what happened to us. But the French are ready to go to war with America in defense of Greenland's sovereign territory and of its ally Denmark. So it's war of all against all. It's war of all the NATO satrapies, slaves that have done America's bidding and are now actually having to gear up to have a rumpus with the Americans. Unless it's not obvious, I'm very pleased about all of this. Trump is showing exactly, this is the benefit of Trump, you see. Trump is showing the true face of the American empire, while the others covered that face in lipstick and a little bit of makeup. Speaking of which, Gayatri has just come into the studio for the social media roundup. Welcome, Gayatri. What's rattling?
Well, this tariff war has been quite the subject of the evening, and we've had callers explaining their grief over Canada because obviously it's the most unexpected one. But Mexico, I'd love to hear more from Mexico if we can have any callers in about it.
What's the beef with Mexico?
Well, fentanyl. It's about the fentanyl. They say that it's because Mexico supplies it.
But it's because the Americans are demanding it.
Well, that's why
they blame China for fentanyl, even though China's fentanyl exports are legal for medical purposes only. Yeah. It's not China's fault that millions of junkies like to stick it up their arse or sniff it up their nose or however you take fentanyl. How would I know?
How would we know? Well, that's why President Sheinbaum has been very obvious about it. If that's your problem, then fix it on your streets, Trump. Yeah. It's not our problem.
And Canada, by the way. Vancouver has the worst fentanyl problem I have ever seen.
Interesting fact about Mexico, though, in this context, is that on this day in 1848, the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and that ended the Mexican-American War. And in this treaty, Mexico ceded 55% of its territory, handing it over to the U.S., including present-day California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico.
What year was that?
1848.
Not that long ago.
No, but imagine the amount of territory.
Make Mexico great again. That should be a slogan.
Exactly. Well, tonight's poll about China overtaking US as a technology superpower seems pretty obvious. On all platforms, the answer is yes. I just want to give a counter answer from Olufemi Okinei.
Oh yeah,
he says,
he's good.
Yeah, he's our friend. He says, no, but it's getting there. It needs a few more years. The US has an advantage of attracting the world's best for now, so they will maintain the innovations and technology edge. And of course, China is the dominant manufacturing and production country right now. And in contrast, Hill says, I'm totally awed by the technological jump that China is making. Then the US can't win this one. The tortoise has surpassed the hare. I'm pleased to see. It's exactly what happened. And Teresa Kelly reminds us, Gigi, as you have beautifully brought to the attention of all the fans of the MOATS, China has lifted over 800 million people out of poverty since 1970. If you think 1848 was not too long ago, 1970 is, within our lifetime. So 100 million people, 100 million of the 800 took place under the awesome leadership of Xi Jinping. And for that reason alone, they are worthy of being the country that brings down the most spiritually corrupt, bankrupt, warmongering, war-profiteering country on the planet. A financial collapse is going to be painful for those of us in the USA. However, it is a price that we should all be willing to pay if it means no more money to fund the abominations that those in Palestine, etc., have endured for decades.
Well, as you know, I don't want that to happen. I love the American people. I have American blood in my veins. I admire greatly many of the great achievements of the American people. I wish them no harm. I just wish them to stay at home and fix their own roof, their own bridges, their own roads, their own social and economic and racial problems. That's what I want them to do, and they can thank me for it later, for this advocacy, because actually that would be the biggest single thing that would benefit the people of the United States. Imagine the money that they have burned setting fire around the world that could have been spent on making their own country look a lot more like China rather than look a lot more like, I don't know, Kathmandu or Ouagadougou. Although Ouagadougou is on the march, they've now got their own airplane. They've now got their own electrical vehicle, EV. Armand Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, is turning out to be a truly great African leader. We're very glad to say.
Yes.
Anything else?
In the footsteps of Sankara. So finally, Wrap Your Soul says, I honestly think that China has a much higher likelihood of being a technology superpower for the foreseeable future due to their beautiful culture, the values they place on education, family and society, and the prevention of war. And these are very important values that make up the society that brings forth these inventions.
Let me toss a discordant note on the table. TikTok. Not that I got any thanks for it from the American state and the American regime. Why do they act like American slaves? They take down my videos, even my videos that are defending China, get banned, ghosted, algorithmically strangled. Why does TikTok do that? What's wrong with you people?
Did they take the Tate's
Yes.
video as well for violence, even though there was no violent
They took an
word
interview
said?
that I did on Wednesday where no word or hint of violence occurred. They took it off, banned it completely under the rubric of violent hate speech or violent extremism.
Exactly, yeah.
There was literally nothing that could conceivably have been said to be violent, and they took it down. They banned it.
Yeah.
What kind of Chinese company does that? But in the past, even speeches I've made defending China have been taken down by TikTok, owned by China. As the Americans say, go figure.
Go figure. Finally, I'm very happy that we had Iosefina Pascal on the show.
Wasn't she great?
We met her when we were in Bucharest past
And
week.
her mother is a big fan of the show.
Big fan of the show. How wonderful! And I hope she.
Hello, Ma.
I hope she brought some insight to this very fascinating situation developing in Romania. Very important country indeed. And please look up on the map so you can locate the proximity of this huge country to the Black Sea, Odessa, Crimea, everything, and you will understand why it's such a NATO stronghold. So lots of fans.
Yeah, the NATO want to use and abuse the people of Romania. It's a good thing if the people of Romania kick them out. But even if they don't kick them out, at least teach them to have some respect.
Finally, on the website, tonight's second hour big donors. Big thanks to Martin Smith, Donna Ross, and Anis Faruqi, Raj Patel, Deborah Brindley, and Nick. They all went to the new MOATS website that you announced earlier in the show, and they hit the donation button. One-off donations as well as recurring donations, very welcome. You can do either every week, every month, quarter, or yearly, £1, £10, $20, whatever suits you best and helps us run the show. It's the new easy way to use the form, and it's there.
Yeah, it's really good TV. Actually. There it is now going up.
Yeah, you can see a bit of history of the show.
Of me, that one. Yeah, the history of the show. It's a really good website. Please check it out. Now, one of the most mysterious of all stories this week was the US military Black Hawk helicopter that flew, it looked deliberately, into an American Airlines jet, killing every single person on board both aircraft. So the last call of the evening might be able to shed some light on that. It's Tyrone in California on that subject. Tyrone, what can you tell us?
Well, I can't tell you anything definitive about what happened. I just wanted to point out that all these things that are going on, like the fires and the crashes, when a government can't keep its people safe, it loses its legitimacy. And there's certain poetic things that point out significance about these different incidents. One example is completely unrelated, is when the first Israeli astronaut crashed down on Palestine, Texas, is that kind of thing. This one, I mean, Ronald Reagan, when he first got into office, it was at Reagan International Airport. And there was some uproar when they decided to change the airport's name to Reagan, because one of his first big things that he did in office in 1981 was fire all the striking air traffic controllers. He fired I don't know, 13,000 air traffic controllers in a big union busting move. It was a real old school California union busting move, and it really precipitated the decline of unions. And some people are saying that they were understaffed at this particular in this case there used to be a separate air traffic controller for the helicopters and the commercial flights. People say that it was definitely the fault of the pilot of the helicopter. Was supposed to be on visual, was supposed to be able to do it. One pilot has said that the helicopter said that he could see the airplane and was probably looking at the wrong plane. There's a line of planes coming in. In any case, I saw it looked like the helicopter flew right into it, but it was a real tragedy. But just the fact that Reagan fired but they deliberately deceived people as to who the pilot was. They withheld the name of the pilot long enough to completely scrub clean all of her social media. And then when they did reveal who she was, it had to reveal, therefore, her relatively small number of flying hours and the fact that she was a staff member at the White House. She was attached to the White House, Joe Biden's White House. And her outfit in the U.S. military was a continuity of government outfit, which deals with the dark possibilities of what might happen in any cataclysm in which the American political leadership is decapitated, how to continue the power of the state and so on. And then she flies into a jet airliner, and they're being all very cagey about who exactly was on board. Last word to you, Tyrone. No, it was strange. It seemed like the tower controller was being awfully deferential to the helicopter, going by their word, whether they saw the plane or not. Yeah. It's a tragedy, and it's like I said, the government is losing legitimacy through corruption. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it the essence of the inadequacy of having capitalism run everything? That air traffic control is a private enterprise in your country, a private enterprise who by definition has as its first duty to make a profit for its shareholders and its directors. What could be more insane than that? I haven't found anything. Tyrone in California, many thanks. Some comments. Monkey Boy says tens of thousands of Ukrainian men are hiding in Poland from Zelensky's conscription thugs. And Christina Hines says Ukraine was known as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. One wonders where Zelensky and his team got the money for their mansions, yachts, and very posh cars. And Stephen Calder says Starmer is pouring billions of our money into Zelensky's pockets for his henchmen too. Billions that should be spent on our health service. You don't say. Well said, Stephen. Akila McCann says Georgescu is right to call Zelensky a dictator. Why should Romania or other EU countries be sticking up for a president who was never elected? The last call goes to the legend. It is Norma in Bristol. How very happy to hear you. We all are, Norma. What would you like to say?
Hello, George. Well, you're talking about octogenarians, and I thought this octogenarian, who's me, will be 87 in 4 weeks. And I'm actually finding all the complications of the various countries a bit difficult to get to grips with, really. I mean, I keep listening to your program, and my main reason for the biggest worry, actually, is Palestine and the future and what's going to happen there. But I just thought I'd tell you, it's all getting a bit much for me, some of these complicated debates, you know? That's all.
Well, I'll tell you what we need to do. We need to get somebody to do a bit of Google for you. One of the viewers should do that and send you, as it were, snippets that explain the background to some of these issues. But I've got to tell you something. You are 87 years young. You are as sharp as a tack. You don't get about as sharply as you used to. Who does? My own mother is 90 years old, and may God preserve her. And she also is as sharp as a tack mentally, and she'll be watching this now and empathizing with you. But the key thing, Norma, is that all of these stories, however complicated and however new some of them may appear to be, are part of the same old story. That the world is ill divided, that those that work the hardest are the least provided, that the rich exploit the poor, and the rich countries exploit the poor countries, and the powerful want to remain powerful and rich. But they can only do that if we lie down forever and let them have their way with us. But we ain't that kind of people. Last word to you, Norma, darling.
It's nice hearing you, George. And I do get a lot of it. It's just some of these presidents from this country and presidents from that country. And I think, oh, I don't even know who they are. That's what gets me. Never mind. Thank you very much.
Imagine what the rest of humanity is like, because I follow your Twitter account, Fagash Flow. Everyone should. And you ain't no confused old dame. Thank you very much indeed, Norma, for that, bringing the show to its conclusion. A big thank you to Donna Ross, who made a very significant recurring donation tonight. So kind of you, Donna. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I've got to take my good wife for chips now. You think I'm joking. And for American and other foreign viewers, I don't mean computer chips. I don't mean casino chips. I mean, and I don't mean crisps. I mean Scottish deep fried chips. God willing, I'll be back on Wednesday with the midweek Mother of All Talk Shows. Join me.